Hello and welcome to another video. This is Falcon Player 2000 and today we are playing Kerbal Space Program, and that was a terrible intro! But yes, today we are playing Kerbal Space Program with a bunch of mods, including RemoteTech. I'm not even gonna try and list them all, other than RemoteTech and Keythane, which are the main, well, some of the main mods, well, important mods, but yes. Now, one of the ways I like to play Kerbal Space Program is to use realistic launch vehicles, and this is a copy, my rendition of a SpaceX launch vehicle, modified. The Falcon 1 is SpaceX is a private space launch company. They have a vehicle called the Falcon 9. It is a small vehicle, about the same size as this. I barely had to downscale it, but this is what I call the Falcon 1 Heavy. It runs along the same concept as the Falcon 9 Heavy, another launch vehicle. It has 2 additional first stage cores to power it. So, yeah. This mission is to launch 4 of the default planetary RemoteTech probes into geostationary orbit. And that is, of course, why I am using the additional 2 cores. As the normal Falcon 1 is only designed to take a payload into low Earth orbit. But anyways, one of the only real unrealistic things about this is Jebediah Kerbin. He's on one of those seats because, unfortunately, you cannot set up landlines or ground connections. You have to have satellite networks for unmanned missions. That's what RemoteTech does. Basically, there are a collection of dishes and antennae that you need, and unmanned probes require a connection to do anything, and there is a delay depending on how far you are away. Although I believe the delay runs at the speed, the signal travels at the speed of light rather than the speed of light. I'm not quite sure what. Never mind. But anyways, we are launching, like I said, 4 of the RemoteTech probes. They are an all-in-one vehicle, one part. They have everything they need. They have omnidirectional antennae, and we currently separated the external cores just a minute ago. Getting up into an orbit now. So basically, the premise of this series is that we are going to, well, play Kerbal Space Program with RemoteTech because it makes it more realistic. I have not added it yet, but there is a mod. I am not quite sure what it is called, but basically it adds crew requirements. You need food and oxygen, and so I'll be using that as well. Zooming in on the engine for no good reason. By the way, this launch is in real time. It speeds up to 4x soon. Jebediah looks like he's having the time of his life, probably because he is. But as you can see, you may notice that the TAC fuel balancer icon is obstructing my altimeter up at the top. So I'm using, if you look at the MechJeb window, I'm using the surface info for the altitude, because the TAC fuel balancer is blocking my view. Yes, one of the things I like to do in Kerbal Space Program, as I already mentioned, is use sort of realistic launch craft. I like to design a launch vehicle, then use it to take payloads into orbit, rather than make a payload, then strap a bunch of fuel tanks on it. But yes, just getting into a geostationary orbit now. Well, not quite yet. Apoapsis is at about 100. We keep going for quite a while till we get a nice apoapsis, something close to about when the first stage burns out. That is another characteristic of SpaceX launch vehicles that holds true in Kerbal Space Program. That the first stage is much larger than the other stages, and is also reusable. Although mine isn't, because I have infinite resources. But, anyways, and somebody suggested to me while I was talking about making this that I simply use mods like the Kerb X mod, which is supposed to add craft like this, and For some specialized vehicles, such as Orion and the Dragon spacecraft, I will use just that part in the mod, from the mod, to use that, but overall I do not want to use a mod that is specifically designed to recreate something. I want to be able to recreate it myself. And as you can see on the map, that little red dot is the Kerbal Space Center. We are currently connected, but we don't need the connection as we have a pilot. Just getting out to our periapsis out and circularizing our orbit. I'm not quite sure why I circularized my orbit here, as I'm just going to go out to a geosynchronous orbit. Now, one thing I do, I get up to geosynchronous altitude, but then my orbit is a 4.5 hour orbit rather than a 6 hour orbit. 6 hours is Kerbin's rotation time, so that I can release each spacecraft each time I come around. And so, yeah. So as you can see, I arranged them quite nicely. These are the little spacecraft. They're quite compact. You'll see how they come out later. It's actually quite nice. Just setting up a maneuver to circularize. Like I said, for no real reason. The video is sped up to 4 times right about now. As you can tell by the loss of sound, Jebediah is still having the time of his life, burning on the dark side here. As you can see, we've lost connection to KSC because we are obstructed by the planet. Now, one thing to note is that satellites have different ranges, and it's not just this satellite. This satellite I've made here is in fact from RemoteTech, and it's like I said, single piece. Has all the functions that you need: a small engine, an antenna, solar panels. But there are also other antennae and satellite dishes that you need. Antennae are omnidirectional, so they can connect from any direction. Satellite dishes have to be pointed at something correctly. The ones that are fixed in place, when you just select the target, and even if it's pointing away from it, it will still work. And the ones that are mounted on the side can often tilt and rotate themselves to point towards whatever they're connecting to. The satellite dishes having a longer range, and they're often needed for. I believe that if you want to do an unmanned mission to anything interplanetary, you need a dish, as none of the antennae are powerful enough to do anything interplanetary. But as you can see, just getting our orbit. If you look in the orbit info, right there, well, it's gone now, but as you can see, orbital period is 4 hours, 30 minutes, and 2 seconds. At this point, we warped here. We are taking down that solar panel, and here we see the microsat. It's got that little engine, the solar panels, the antennae, moving quite quickly now, just getting into a fully geosynchronous orbit. And now we switch back to the Falcon 1 Heavy, extend those solar panels, which is sort of no clip because logic. Don't want that to run out of power. Switching back to the probe now, fixing its geosynchronous orbit as it wasn't quite correct. It's good enough for me at that point, though. So I quick save, and you can see the satellite. And now we switch and time warp. Now at this point, miraculously, Kerbin does not block the connection right here, although we probably could connect to that other satellite that is currently in orbit. But as you can see, we extend the antenna and the solar panels of the second probe, and once again extend it to geosynchronous altitudes, and once again we screw up and have to do a correction midway. I think. Not quite certain. Paused for a moment there. Okay, extending the solar panels, making sure we don't run out of power once again. Switching to the microsat, that's what it's called. Yep, I do a correction right around here. With my apoapsis is 2871, which is sort of high. As perfect geosynchronous altitude is 2,868.5, I believe. Well, no, 2,868.5 meters. Wow. I'm just gonna go with 2,868.5 kilometers. There we go. We got it right. Totally. As you can see, we are once again correcting our burn, correcting our orbit. this time from the map screen. And it's finally good enough for me. And now, here goes. As you can see, we do not have a connection directly, but we are connected via that satellite, which is quite nice. And we will release the third satellite at this point. Extend the solar panels for that one. Extend the solar panels for that one. Turn to prograde, and once again, burn. At this point, I'm more careful about it. Don't want to have to make a correction midway, so I haven't even done the burn yet. I still end up having to do a correction midway. But the next unmanned launches should be actually unmanned, as this unfortunately had to be manned due to the limitations of having systems on the ground on Kerbin. Now, at this point, I guess I can list some of the mods I have. I can't list nearly all of them, but among them we have KW Rocketry, Nova Punch. Now my mind just went blank. RemoteTech, B9, Keythane. We also have the HSH, HSH for hollow structures and holes. Basically, they are what they sound like, hollow structures and holes. So the Kerbals can walk around in them, or rather fly around. I am thinking about getting it's called like the seasickness fix. For some reason I warp like a ton there, and I have no idea why. I don't quite remember. But the mission has been going on for a day now, so Jebediah probably has some nasty stuff in his suit, as he's been sitting in a seat this whole time. But anyways, some of the other mods. HSH is quite useful. I'm probably going to be using it for both orbital stations and ground bases. But there's also something called something like seasickness fix. As normally Kerbals can only stand on bodies, like gravitational bodies. For some reason I spin like that. Don't know why. Maybe because it's the last one. But they can only technically stand on the bodies of planets and moons. And if they're, say, standing on something in the air, then they will just fall over. Sometimes it doesn't, but for the most part, that usually happens a lot on aircraft, or really spacecraft. And I don't really like that. It's annoying, but there's a mod called Seasickness Fix, which is supposed to fix that. Not sure how well it does, but, you know. At this point, we have released all 4 satellites into a geosynchronous orbit, and now we are re-entering the atmosphere. Now, normally, of course, this would all burn up, but this is Kerbal Space Program, so we have a great excuse. At this point, I realize I'm coming in too low, so I tried to burn to maybe get it up a little bit, and I sort of did, but not really. So here we're just time warping down into the atmosphere, and we immediately warp to ×2, and then up to ×4 in a minute. We align it correctly as we re-enter the atmosphere at ridiculous speeds. Not quite sure what's wrong with the EVA there. It's being a little bit weird. And now we are spinning like crazy, and I have no idea why. So, sort of slowly stop the spin as we decelerate from several thousand meters a second. And then I spin it again manually because it's fun. At this point, I decouple the seat and fly it down. Realize it's like flipping out, and then I turn off SAS, and it's fine. It's got a little parachute. Jebediah is in it, and I'm assuming the rocket crashes into the sea, and we slowly float down into the blue. Da 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 da. Jebediah doesn't look happy anymore. What's wrong, Jeb? What's wrong, Jeb? You're always supposed to be happy. Swing around, and now we do this. But I know you don't really want to see that. That was boring. So I go in, I load the last quick save, but you don't want to see you don't want to see something like that. you want to see, we all want to see Jebediah re-enter the atmosphere manually. Now I do have the, not sure what the plugin is called, but basically it gives the Kerbal's parachutes. It's something like, can't remember now. Vanguard plugin, yes. Vanguard, so the Kerbal has its own parachute. Jebediah re-enters the atmosphere. And at some point here, I realized that I'm actually coming over quite close to the Kerbal Space Center, so I sort of slow down and I use my try to use my RCS pack to land at the KSC, and I utterly fail. But at this point, we switch back to Jebediah, and Jebediah actually goes back out of the atmosphere. And at this point, we really get close to Kerbal Space Center, but I did not begin to use my RCS pack quite at the right time. As you can see, I'm at 4 times acceleration, currently using it. And now I'll go to 1x acceleration, and it starts to use it more efficiently. He doesn't flip out sideways. As you can see, when I right-click him, you see fully deploy and semi-deploy parachute. That is, of course, the Vanguard parachute plugin. And we do not, in fact, land at Kerbal Space Center. We land relatively close, you know, at least it's not halfway around the planet. So once again, using all of our RCS pack, and we do run out of our RCS before we reach our target. Well, after we pass our target by. So you can see it right there, down on that little peninsula, as we fly past it at thousands of meters a second, burning up, or rather not burning up, because the spacesuit's clearly magic. I mean, what else could it be? Looking at him, thought that was sort of evil looking, like evil Kerbal in the flames. No, just me. Okay, just checking. But anyways, just floating down once again into the blue of the ocean. Preparing to fully deploy the parachute. So we will go much slower. Time warp down to 1 now. And here we go. And now we simply slowly float down into the ocean. This has been Falcon Flyer 2000. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like the video, leave a comment down below, subscribe for more. But for now, this is Falcon Flyer 2000, signing off. I'll see you next time.